Awesome.
Bienvenidos a Negocios con BISILA BOKOKO. Welcome to Business with BISILA BOKOKO. We say this in English and Spanish. It's all right. And today I'm super happy to be with Angie Assal. And we're going to speak about the Arabic culture and of course the 3D printing. That is something that we all want to learn about. So, but before we do that, I would like to welcome you, Angie. How are you today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. I'm doing pretty well. I mean, considering I feel like nowadays that question is so like because of the last year and a half, 2 years, everyone's like, how am I? But thankfully, I'm okay.
That's great to hear. So tell us a little bit about your background, being a Lebanese, American Lebanese, born in New York. Is that something? So I would love to know how that feels and how this influenced your work.
Yeah, so growing up, it was actually kind of awkward because I feel like it was little Lebanon at home, but then obviously like the world I exist in is New York, New York is pretty diverse, but overall still American, you know? And so it caused a lot of like, who am I? Because I always felt like I wasn't Lebanese enough, but then I wasn't American enough. And so I was in this weird limbo of just like, okay, well, I don't fully connect here, but then I didn't grow up, in villages and mountains in Lebanon like my parents did. And so I would have these like disagreements or like just confusion with like my classmates and friends, but then also with my parents. But as I got older, I just grew more and more of an appreciation. Because like we have such a rich history and culture, like the music, the dance, the language, poetry, everything. Like there's so much there, and it's also in this country, honestly, a privilege to even know what your background is, because historically, how many people were not allowed to?
Yeah.
Like if they actually engaged in anything of their culture, there were serious repercussions. Languages eliminated, names changed to be more Americanized. So I feel like it's my duty. Like I know where I come from, and to me it's my duty to at least learn about it. And then I like to be involved. I like to get to know my community because there's so many other. Like I realized as I got older and like sort of just met more people. Like there's tons of other Arabs like me. It doesn't matter what their background are. If they're Chinese American, they're from Trinidad and Tobago, like there's wherever they're from, there's that same experience of like, I'm half here, half there. Yeah, so I definitely, I love getting to just know more and more of my culture. And I visited growing up too. Beautiful. So it's not like I've never been there. Like I've met all my family there. I try to go at least once every year, once every 2 years, depending obviously nowadays it's really hard, but yeah, it's like a huge part of who I am, and I feel lucky and proud, to be Lebanese and be Arab and just to know.
Yeah. So before we go into the Arabic culture and how do you have made that a passion and work, I would like to know, how did you end up in 3D printing and working for Subways, and what is that?
Yeah, so it's actually really funny. Before I got into 3D printing, I'm sorry, do you hear like the sirens?
Yes, but this is New York City, right?
Yeah, okay. So... No,
hello, I live in here.
Yeah. But yeah, so before I got into 3D, so 3D printing is considered like additive manufacturing, meaning like you add layers to build whatever shape or tool, whatever. So before I got into 3D printing, I was doing kind of the opposite of that, which was subtractive manufacturing. So things that involve like routing, drills, things that like remove material to make the end result, or like cut material to make the end result. And honestly, the big part of it, like I just lived very far from that job. Like it was in Connecticut, in Danbury, and I live in, in New York City, and I drive, but it was just like a lot every day. And I was just looking for a new job. I was like, I'm kind of like done with this. I want to, be somewhere closer. So I found the Shapeways link kind of like by coincidence. And I had no experience in 3D printing. I'd always wanted to learn 3D modeling, but just had not been able to, or I didn't make time for it before then. And I was just like, let me see if they'll take me. Like, cause my brother also would use Shapeways. Like he would order stuff from Shapeways. And so that's how like I even knew the company existed. Otherwise I would have no idea. Like if because the 3D printing world is kind of like esoteric a bit. Like the average person knows nothing about it.
I just learned very like in June, I was in a company called Tempe, which is the company that manufactures the things for Zara, the belts and the footwear and everything. And then I met geniuses in the 3D printing department and they explained me what they do. And I was like, wow. So that's why I'm so excited to speak about this with you. And it is great that you say this is an esoteric industry somehow, because it is.
Yeah, unless it's like really your hobby or like, you know, I studied sculpture when I was in college. And so even though I didn't get a chance to take like the 3D modeling and printing classes, but I knew it was a thing, you know. But otherwise, most people have no idea. And like even nowadays, it's actually so much more accessible than people realize. Like you can get a desktop printer and they're getting more and more affordable. Like sometimes with discounts, they can be like $130.
Oh.
Like to have a 3D printer in your home. And a lot of 3D modeling software, you can find it for free. A lot of the slicing software. So slicing is just how they like, it takes your 3D model and it turns into code that allows the printer to know what to do. So it's like, okay, it'll make code like, okay, I have to make a circle this big and like layer it, you know, whatever. It's like a simple way of putting it. But yeah, but even those softwares you can find for free.
Wow.
And like all you need is internet. And so it's so much more accessible. But even I didn't know that before starting at Shapeways.
What Shapeways does exactly?
So essentially like we do various types of 3D printing and there's all different kinds of materials. There's metals, there's different plastics. There's kind of these like silicone-y, rubbery plastics. And so let's say you're a company and you have an idea for like a prototype or just something you want to have kind of made over and over again. You can have like either someone make you a 3D model or you have a modeler like in your company and they make a 3D model and then you can outsource that labor to Shapeways.
Okay, beautiful.
And so they'll 3D print, you know, and then there's different processing options for depending on the material. Like I work in the nylon department. And so with that plastic, it's porous. And so you're able to dye it, you can polish it. So like there's always these options. Whenever someone orders, they will go, you know, do that. Like, what color do you want it? Do you want this? Do you want that?
How do you think that 3D printing will change the manufacturing industry?
I mean, it is growing and fast. Like, and it's in a lot of ways revolutionary. Like, I feel like I was talking to one of my coworkers also about this because he actually taught me 3D modeling, which led to me even having my business. You know, it's like a really interesting like. And so I was discussing stuff like this with him, just all the time. But like things like, for example, like figurines, especially things with joints. Normally, like if it's manufactured via like injection molding, you kind of like make each part and then you have to assemble it together and like put it together. That's extra labor. Just that aspect of like, you know, and like the time it takes. I'm sure obviously when people do it enough, it takes them like 30 seconds, but still like why spend those, even if it's only 30 seconds, if you can model in the joints already. Wow. And then it'll print with the joints already there. So like, you know, that takes out a whole step of your entire process.
Wow.
And even like people will 3D print custom medical supplies, like things like knee braces. They can even print just various types of even like attachments. Like I know we've also done like drone parts at Shapeways. Wow. I see all kinds of stuff from like all walks of the earth. But yeah, I feel like especially for prototyping, it's an amazing and cost-effective way to get like several options of kind of what you're thinking about and just have it in front of you and be able to like, okay, like, no, I don't like this. Do I like this? Maybe, you know, it just, I feel like it makes testing easier and it makes, depending on what you're making, it makes just the actual manufacturing easier.
So you will say that it's 3D printing a growth industry?
Absolutely.
And if you have any numbers, just, you know, we are in business.
No, I know. Yeah. I mean, if it were like my company, I would happily just be like, yeah, like this is, you know, whatever. But I don't want to like discuss Shapeways' finances or whatever. But I mean, we've been around for, I think, over a decade now. And so just the bigger and bigger that it gets, like it's definitely, it's super I mean, any business in theory could be profitable. Like the guy who invented the pet rock.
Yes.
You know, like, so like if he can make that happen, like there's absolutely so much potential with 3D print, even with jewelry. Like, you know, I personally feel like if someone's interested in jewelry, like making it, I think it's absolutely still valuable to learn to do it by hand, because this is like history, this is generations, this is tradition. But at the same time, like you can, because you work with your hands, you can 3D model jewelry and then have it printed in metal.
Wow.
And then again, that cuts out, it's still your design, it's still your artwork. Like it doesn't take away your hand per se. But it's a way just to get things like so much easier, and you could see your vision, like, you know.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
Yeah, and there's two different ways to, like, so you can print literally in metal. Like there's that process, but also what usually happens, they 3D print in wax. And then they make molds, and so they melt out the wax from the mold, and then they pour metal inside.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So that takes me to the next question. What is Sound of Mazzika project? Because I think there is a link between what you're doing in Shapeways and this project. So
yeah, absolutely. It's really funny. So the way that I even came up with the idea for Sound of Mazzika, it started off as something just for me. So I started learning percussion. Because I found my dad's drum. I have the drum actually right next to me. I can show you.
Yes, sure.
This is my baby.
Oh.
And so I started learning how to play. Initially, like I thought it would just be a hobby, but then after the first lesson, I was like, I want to do this with my life forever. I want to be a musician. But and so I decided to look up like earrings. So there's a lot of names for this drum. Some call it darbuka, some call it riqq, some call it tabla. Some call it dumbek. Like there's so many names. So I tried Googling every name that I knew of, and like for earrings, I've always loved just quirky jewelry and, you know, whatever. I could not find it anywhere. And then I was just thinking to myself, I'm an artiste. Like let me just make them myself. Like I'll just make myself a pair. And so I asked my coworker to help me learn 3D modeling. And so I would stay sometimes an hour after, I would clock out and just be on the computers at work. Like, how do I do this? How do I do that? And we had like a schedule, like every Monday I would stay later. It's really funny. And so then I made my first pair, and I didn't even have like paints for it yet. I just used nail polish to paint it like my drum. And I would wear them all the time because I loved them. And I 3D printed them with nylon, like the department that I'm in, because it's pretty flexible. Like it's durable and it's air light. Like even everything I'm wearing now, it feels like I'm not wearing anything. Like I wouldn't even know I'm wearing jewelry. And I do fall asleep in it sometimes. I'm like, oh, oops, like I have to take it off. And then people on the street would be like, oh, wow, your earrings, like, what is that? What's this like thing? And I would explain, and they'd be like, wow, I never knew that about Arabic music, or I never knew this instrument before. And then people who did recognize it would be like, oh my God, wow, you made that? That's so cool. And so I was just like, you know what? Like, this is an opportunity, for people who grew up like me, you know, to have items that we relate to. Because like I've seen like, you know, piano t-shirts and like guitar stuff. Like, so even though it's novelty items, it is like exciting when you can connect to something. And then on top of that, for those who don't know anything about Arab culture, because when you don't know anything about something, you tend to be a little bit, you know,
yeah,
yeah, for lack of a better word, just cabin.
I get it.
Exactly, yeah. And so when people know more about something and can see the beauty in something, you know, that also opens up more acceptance. Because especially, I mean, post 9/11, like I'm sure most Arabs would talk about, like it was really awkward. And I was 6 years old when 9/11 happened. And it even made me like almost not want to be Arab because there was so much stigma.
Of course.
Against it. And so having for me an outlet to like embrace my culture in a way that could get people to learn more and realize like, you know, everyone's just people. Like no matter what you're about, you know, like we're all just people, but these cultures, whatever, like they separate us when there's so much more overlap than people even realize. Like Greeks also have, you know, these instruments and like their music is amazing. Turkish, Persian, like the whole like, and even there's a dance in like Arab culture called debki, primarily in like the Levantine area, so like Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, but it's kind of like all over the place. But you know, there's line dancing even in like Irish culture. And so when somebody like learns about these different, you know, it's a way for everyone to realize like the overlaps and the beautiful differences. So like, for me, it's like so important, and I just like cute things.
Beautiful. So you will say that is your mission as an artist, designer, to really spread around the Arab culture in a positive manner. Just to wrap up, let us know, how did you realize that it was your mission? And I mean, how do you want to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, once I realized the reaction I was getting for these things, like that definitely is kind of what sparked that mission. Because even in college, like towards the end of, you know, I did like my senior project and stuff, a lot of it was about the fetishization and like indulgence of Arab culture without caring about the people. Like at least in the States, like, you know, things like hummus is a fad now, and people love tabbouleh and, you know, whatever. You'll find like I saw a thing of like tabbouleh hummus in Trader Joe's. I was like, why? Like, you know, like that's not how you eat it, but whatever. But but knowing that like it's another vehicle for me, because I've always loved visual arts. And so being able to fuse these different things that I love into kind of one project, to me is amazing. And I do love music, and like I down the line I want to build kind of a community of like Arab artists.
Beautiful.
And not just Arab, just even like Persians as well, Turks as well, all of it. Just kind of a community where like of not just musicians but just like artists in general, and to highlight our musicians, especially women, because I know you mentioned like you like to uplift like women's, and anyone who doesn't have a voice normally, like you like to uplift that, which is, I'm definitely the same way, where like when I go to concerts for, you know, for Arabic music, I almost never see a woman on the stage.
And how do you want to do that of a business? It's going to be only a passion, or you want to do that of a business?
That's something I definitely teeter-tot with. I feel like in terms of the uplifting artists as a whole, that's more of the passion side. And then just the products that I make and design are more of like the business side.
Beautiful.
So that way, like the business side can fund the passion side. Like,
I love that. I love that combination. Well, thank you so much, Angie, for being with us today. I really enjoyed it. And I will continue following and learning more about the Arab culture that you want to spread. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people will be also fascinated to know that there is so much positive sides. And there is one thing that you said, that is more things that keep us closer. That is not, we are not so far away. And I think I love that. And this is something that I would like that people really stay with. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. And thank you just for this project as a whole. Like I watched a ton of your other videos, and I'm just really impressed, and yay.
I'm so glad you like it. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you.